Hello, welcome to Sharon Local History. I would like to share some information about Sharon and Sharon being dry town. So basically about Sharon and its relationship with alcohol. I will be using lots of stock images to give you idea about the history of alcohol in town. Sometimes the images don't fit exactly the period I'm talking about, but you should get the feel. This is a very wide topic, and I included clippings from articles that may give you a little bit more understanding how residents felt about alcohol sales in Sharon. Feel free to use the pause button to read the whole article, otherwise, there's not enough time to read it. At this point, I would like to throw in a fun fact. Due to the unsafe drinking water, passengers on the Mayflower drank beer as a main hydration source. And they started to run out of beer as the ship was approaching Plymouth Rock. Sharon has been historically a dry town, rather interesting since we started, or first settlers started the town by building a tavern, Billings Tavern. Amongst the list of historic homes are Cobb's Tavern, Savil's Tavern, Johnson's Tavern, and the list goes on. Did all taverns serve flip and rum, or was tavern synonym for hotel? Perhaps the earliest mention of a drinking problem is in Sharon was recorded by Reverend Philip Curtis. Our first minister was hired in 1741, and he was paid in hay and wood. Men fought over who was going to do the mowing of his hay for the minister because they were paid in rum. Perhaps this is why the ministerial meadow was also known as Reynolds Misery Meadow. The ministerial meadow now lies submerged beneath Car Works or Travel Works Pond. It is that body of water when you drive on North Main Street. The land was set out for use of the people of what is now Sharon and Canton to provide for their minister. The use of the medder hay was to be the minister's alone or was to be sold to provide his salary. Deborah Sampson raised more than eyebrows when she shared a flagon of rum with Paul Revere in the tap room at Cobb's Corner. The movement that was to become known as temperance or prohibition started as early as 1808. The formation of temperance societies began early in the 19th century. The first officially organized one in Sharon was established in 1832, although citizens groups have been meeting before then to express their concerns over the extent of public drinking in town. As an outgrowth of these meetings, the townspeople voted in 1830 to direct the selectmen not to approbate any person, tavernier, or retailer of spirituous liquors the present year. When drinkers were found to be hiding small flasks of rum under their heads, a committee was appointed to make certain that the licensing law was enforced. In 1832, Mr. Jonathan Crane, a boarder at Johnson's Tavern, started the first Prohibition Society in Sharon. By the way, Savil's Tavern, that was called later Johnson's Tavern, was very busy at the time because the railroad was being built, and it was headquarters for the engineers and other leaders of the corporation. He was a railroad employee who, in all his spare time, compelled young boys to sign a pledge that they would abstain from hard liquor. Wine was permitted. He worked from boys to men, and meetings were held in the Unitarian Church vestry on Sunday afternoons. Those opposed to temperance were called the Rummies. Threats from the Rummies, which compelled Crane to hire George H. Mann, Deacon Joel Hewins, and William R. Mann as bodyguards, boomeranged. Between 1840 and 1895, the Sharon Temperance Society would be joined by three divisions of the Sons of Temperance, also the Sharon Abstinence Society, the Sharon Reform Club, the Independent Order of God Templars, and the Women's Christian Temperance Union, all whose holy grail was abstinence, attained voluntarily through legislation. William R. Mann was the first adult male to sign the pledge. The Sharon Total Abstinence Society was started in 1844 and lasted about 4 years. During its lifespan, the society petitioned the state legislature to pass a law prohibiting intoxicating drinks. The law was not passed in 1849. Under their influence, however, the selectmen did in 1847 designate that only Dr. Y. Tyrrell be given a license to sell liquor for medical and mechanical purpose only. Another organization, Division of the Sons of Temperance, was started in 1857. It was a revival of the original society and was quite popular for a while. Meetings were held weekly in the Unitarian Church. The oath taken did not prohibit the use of tobacco or profanity. Much of the temperance work was called to halt by the Civil War. Letters home from Sharon soldiers reveal how disgusted they were with the loose morals of a camp life, the swearing, the drunkenness. Attention was focused on those left behind. Mrs. Addison Johnson formed an organization for children called the Band of Hope. Their pledge did prohibit the use of tobacco and swearing. Mr. Johnson was killed in the war, and William R. Mann took over the work. In researching this subject, I came across mention of Johnson's Tavern. It was described as being just south of where the library is now. It had an L on the north side of the building, which was used for a bar room. The L was removed and the building moved down the street. It is now 13 High Street. The author of this information, Amy Rafter Pratt, did not state by whom the tavern was moved or when or why the bar room was removed. I would like to add interesting fact about Edwin Clark, who was born here in Sharon in 1823. He made a product that was called Clark's Sherry Bitters wine, and he claimed that this product would cure asthma, dyspepsia, and all sorts of fatigue. Those who consumed his bitters swore that alcohol was the devil's brew, and none of that poison would ever touch their lips. They were proud to state that they had never touched a drop. Yet, at the same time, they all religiously took their bitters because they adored the way it relaxed them and made them feel so much better. It, in a sense, was 90% alcohol. Even in the days when there was a tax on alcoholic beverages, Clark was never taxed because his was a medicinal product. There were many more health liquors that people were making. This is another advertisement from Sharon Advocate. Many of those medicines were full of alcohol. Other issues took over the thoughts of our town during the Civil War and on into the World War I. Social issues such as women's rights, slavery, human rights, and the treatment of the insane, capital punishment, and disarmament. The history of temperance movement was one of ebb and flow, and it would be a full 20 years after the activities of the 90s before the reformers would prevail and celebrate the enactment of the 18th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States. Implementation came in 1920 with the passage of the Congress of the Volstead Act prohibiting sales of alcoholic beverages anywhere in the country. Official validation of the reformers' honesty held contention that the term social drinking is an oxymoron. Rampant police and political corruption allowed for the unimpeded flow of the domestically distilled product dubbed bathtub gin, or the pricier goods that came over the road from Canada to flow into the hands of the city mobsters who waged open warfare among themselves over the control and distribution of bottled liquor. Before the Roaring Twenties, as the decade was called, came to an end, there were more illegal clubs, speakeasies, in operation nationwide selling all manner of alcoholic drink than there had been saloons before the advent of the Prohibition. Persistent rumor has it that even in quiet Sharon, where there was no mob presence or influence, the proper password, something like "Joe sent me," could arrange for a clandestine 90-proof interlude in at least one of the town's lakefront hotels. Mrs. George A. Dennett, Sharon's own Carrie Nation. Carrie Nation was American temperance advocate famous for using a hatchet to demolish bar rooms. She was truly very famous for carrying her hatchet across her native Kansas and chopping down saloons. It was said that between chops she preached that an emptied whiskey bottle was a passport to purgatory, the visa stamped by Satan himself. Now let's get back to Sharon and Mrs. George A. Dennett. Headlines in the June 26, 1906 Boston Post carried this picture with the headline, "Sharon's Women Say Town is Corrupt." According to the article, Mrs. Dennett and her friend, Mrs. Mary E. Hickson, crusaded to rid the town of drunkards and accused the selectmen and constables of negligence in allowing kitchen barrooms to flourish in the town. They also allege that the youth of the town are being degenerated by association in such places. The murders, mayhem, arson, and corruption of the Prohibition years led to the repeal of the 18th Amendment, effective in 1933, with the choice of going wet or remaining dry a local option. The liquor option went to the Sharon voters first on March 5, 1934, when municipal elections were being held. By a vote of 693 to 480, the voters rejected a proposition allowing the sale of all alcoholic beverages, while approving by a vote 598 to 553 the issuance of licenses for the sale of beer and wine only. What followed were 26 arrests for public drunkenness over a 6-month period. The liquor referenda was resubmitted by the selectmen and appearance on the ballot at the general election held in November of the same year. The vote sanctioning sale of beer and wine was overturned by a vote of 716 to 679. Since that election, the voters have been steadfast in their refusal to license packaged liquor stores. This is not to say that drinkers here did without. What they wanted came delivered or was carried home from neighboring towns. Eventually, restaurants seating 100 or more patrons and clubs, including veterans organizations, won the right to serve alcohol for on-premise consumption only. Licensees have acted with restraint. Through the centuries of its use, alcoholic drink had been seen as a servant of many by some and by others as the devil's own brew. Most would argue that the problem lies not with the substance itself, but with the dosage taken. Control over consumption remains as vexing a problem as it has ever been. Few would welcome the resurrection of the 18th Amendment, preferring instead the concept of the local option. The call for abstention by the reformers of 100 years ago and before has been replaced by the call for caution by a full generation of Sharon's voters. At this point, in January 2022, Sharon has got few restaurants as well as few liquor stores, and Sharon is not dry town anymore and anybody can purchase any kind of alcohol. We have a total of 5 liquor licenses now. This is the end of the video. I had fun researching the topic, and I certainly hope it gave you a little understanding of Sharon's relationships with alcohol. Thank you for watching Sharon Local History.